Well, this first one, I don't even know
No,
what
we
the
don't
words
need
mean,
it.
so
Yeah, let's just, we don't say it.
first one we'll do, but then
She's going this, all right?
ready? All right. Wichita do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Washington, Noah, hey ya, hey ya. Washington, Noah, hey ya, hey. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Washington, Noah, hey ya, hey ya. Washington, Noah, hey ya, hey. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Washington, Noah, hey ya, hey ya. Washington, Noah, hey ya, hey. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Washington, Noah, hey ya, hey ya. Washington, Noah, hey ya, hey.
Everybody stood up.
I know.
Hello. My name is Mary Lanners, and I am chair of the Justice Council here at Pax Christi. This is Peg Musegades, who leads Pax Christi's Care for Creation ministry. We are so happy that you have chosen to join us for this Earth Day celebration. We have a great morning planned. We begin in song and prayer, and then we will listen to our guest speakers. We expect to take an extended break at about 10:30, providing time for restrooms and to walk along the River of History timeline, which has been installed along the walls in our east and north side hallways. Then we will return to the sanctuary for our virtual tour of the native plants that live on our grounds. The first official proclamation of the land acknowledgement, and then hospitality time. A wonderful lunch provided by Mazapia out of Prairie Lake. If you need to take a break before our official break time, please feel free to do so.
In Laudato Si, Pope Francis calls us to undergo an ecological conversion. What's an ecological conversion, you may ask? Well, it's a transformation of our hearts and our minds towards a greater love of our Creator, of each other, and creation. This movement acknowledges our social and our ecological crisis. Our responsibility is to act in a way that nature communions us together. It communions us in healing and renewing our common home. I cannot think of a better opportunity to pause and reflect where we are on our journeys of ecological conversion than here with us today for Earth Day. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Peg. We now warmly welcome the first of our honored guests, the members of the Ossagnac Women's Hand Drum Group, to begin our day. Thanks for being with us and welcome.
Miigwech for having us. We're really honored to be here. The first song we sang was a water song. This next song is an eagle song, and the words would be, I hear the eagle, I see the eagle I go with. So. Miigwech. This last song we'll do is the Water Song. It comes from the Algonquin on the East Coast with grandmothers who asked us to share this song. In fact, everybody to share it. And the words essentially mean water is the lifeblood of our Mother Earth, and water is the lifeblood of our own bodies.
Please stand and join in our gathering song. Praise be you in all creatures.
Praise be to you.
Through brother, sun, and radiant light.
Praise be to you.
Praise be you through sister moon.
Praise be to you.
And through the stars you form them bright.
Praise be to you. All the earth rejoices, O God, and sings your praise, woven in communion by your love. Let our praise for you be shown in tenderness in all we do. Praise be to you.
Praise be you through brother way.
Praise be to you.
You give creation
Praise
life.
be to
Praise be you through sister water.
Praise be to
Useful, flowing, pure and clear.
All the earth is yours, O God, and sings your praise, woven in communion by your love.
Let our praise for you be shown in tenderness in all we do. Praise be to you. Praise be you through brother fire.
Praise be to you.
You light the dark of night.
Praise be to you.
Praise be you through Mother Earth.
Praise be to you.
Who governs and sustains all life.
All the earth is yours, O God, and sings your praise, woven in communion by your love.
Let our praise for you be shown
Shown in tenderness
in all sacraments of love and peace.
Praise be to you.
Praise be you through Sister Death.
Praise be to you.
From whom no living thing escapes.
Praise be to you.
All the earth is yours, O God, and sings your praise. Woven in communion by your love. Let our praise for you be shown in tenderness. In all we do. Praise be to you. Praise be to you. Praise be to
Creator God, Great Spirit, we pray our thanks for the opportunity to gather in this sacred space. We give thanks for the gift of wind and the four directions which it comes. We give thanks for the gift of sun. We give thanks for the gift of humanity. We give thanks for the gift of creation. This day, we pray thanksgiving for our indigenous neighbors. To be people of atonement and reconciliation. Creator, we give you thanks for all you are and all that you bring to us within your creation. In Jesus, you place the gospel in the center of the sacred circle through which all creation is related. You show us the way to live a generous and compassionate life. Give us your strength to live together with respect and commitment as we grow in your spirit, for you are God, now and forever. Amen. Please be seated.
Lord, you have the words of everlasting life, of everlasting life. Lord, you have the words of everlasting life, of everlasting life. The law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The decree of the Lord is trustworthy, giving wisdom to the simple. Lord, you have the words of everlasting life, of everlasting life. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The command of the Lord is clear, enlightening the eye. Lord, you have the words of everlasting life, of everlasting life. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever.
are true, all of them just. Lord, you have the words of everlasting life, of everlasting life. They are purer than gold, than a heap of purest gold, sweeter also than syrup or honey from the comb. Lord, you have the words of everlasting life, of everlasting life.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And a second is like this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." The Gospel of the Lord. You may be seated.
The Land Acknowledgement Prayer. As we gather in this sacred space, the ancestral land of the Metawakan Sioux family, we embrace our Gospel's call for reconciliation and what that reconciliation means here and now. We embrace our mission to act for justice, be of generous service, and welcome all authentically. As stewards of this sacred space, we are grateful for the wisdom of the indigenous people. We are grateful for their deep respect for the earth, for their belief in giving without looking for anything in return, for their belief in the sacredness of relationships. May our care for the Pax Christi community of Eden Prairie grow in the same wisdom. We acknowledge the deep historical, spiritual, and personal injustices against Indigenous people that continue today as segregation and prejudice. We pledge to listen to the Indigenous people to guide us to responsible action for reconciliation and mutual respect. May we continue to educate ourselves. May we promote healing, respect, and love. Let us journey together in partnership, celebrating our Creator's gifts of people, land, and water, nurturing each other and this sacred space.
Open my eyes that I may see your gaze, beholding me with love so pure. The truths revealed, my life broken. Open my eyes that I may choose to risk deeply encountering you in the frailty and presence of real connection with those I love and those I don't. Draw me one step closer, just one step closer to you. Open my ears that I may hear wisdom speaking within your word, enlightening me, inviting me to a change of heart. Open my ears that I may hear your call to let go of the hurt and fear that erode my trust
a tender embrace, an honest caress of forgiveness. Open my heart to your language of love, of putting another before myself, being patient, not reactive, being one who truly listens, always offering kindness. Draw me one step closer, one step closer, one step closer. One step
Hello, everyone. My name is Joan Halpoulis. I'm the Director of Justice Ministries here at Pax Christi, and it is my distinct honor to introduce our speakers to you today. Sheldon P. Wolfchild, Dakota, was born and raised on the Lower Sioux Reservation in Morton, Minnesota. He is a graduate of Morton High School and completed 4 years of art school in New Mexico and Chicago, Illinois. Starting out at Disney Studios in 1971, Sheldon has 25 years experience working in the Hollywood film industry. He is a documentary filmmaker, and we'll get to that in a moment too. Former president of the Lower Sioux Reservation and a Vietnam War veteran. And Steve Newcomb, who will be joining us through our live stream from California. Steve Newcomb, Shawnee, is co-founder and director of the Indigenous Law Institute, which he founded with Traditional Agala, Lakota headman Virgil Kills Straight. Newcomb has been studying and writing about U.S. federal Indian law and policy and the doctrine of discovery and domination for some 4 decades, and the patterns of domination and dehumanization used for centuries against indigenous nations and peoples on the basis of the Vatican papal documents and royal charters. He published many of his findings in his book, Pagans in the Promised Land, Decoding the Doctrine of Christian Discovery. And he is co-producer of a documentary movie, The Doctrine of Discovery, Unmasking the Domination Code, which was directed by Sheldon Wolfchild, a movie based on the book Pagans in a Promised Land. So with that, I will invite Sheldon Wolfchild to come up and share with us.
Oh, midakuyasi. Dakota iya wichakpi wichaksha imaki apido. I would like to first say that we're all grateful today to be here on our Unshi Maka Day, or our Sacred Mother Earth Day. And we're grateful for all the blessings of the female women, as Mother Earth is the woman for all of us, the creation of all life that she gives us, so are the women of our nation. They are honored by giving us children in that way. So in that manner, we are very deeply respectful for that process that we get to live in a normal, natural way of balance in our life and in our existence. I would like to thank Mary Lanners, the chair here, Joan Howe-Pulis, and the other members of the board for having the power in their own way of goodness to put this event on. Again, it's the women that are stepping forward to have this courage to respect Mother Earth, to respect historical truth, and we're grateful for them to step forward at this time. So thank you to all of you, to all of our relatives, all of the women in our nation here and around the world. I am originally from here. I'm a member of the Bide-Wakantua Band of Dakota of the Great Sioux Nation. My grandfather's village, Black Dog, is right down the river here on Minnesota River, where my relatives are from, and from Chief Black Dog. I would like to begin today remembering two very important gentlemen in our documentaries, The Doctrine of Discovery and The Indian System. They have gone to the spirit world now. They've been on their journey, and they're in a beautiful place now. First of all, in The Doctrine of Discovery, Virgil Killstraight, our elder, a wonderful man that Stephen will speak about shortly. Virgil led the way in this whole process back in the early 80s and 90s on his own to begin the process of researching and going on his own to Europe and to Israel and different places to study the doctrine of discovery. And from that, Stephen can proceed from that process of how he met Virgil. So thank you, Virgil, for your insight and your wisdom and coming from your heart and doing this for all of our people. And in our second document, the Indian System, David Nichols, Dr. David Nichols from Kansas, wrote a wonderful book called The Indian System. And David passed away this past November. He's on his journey, and what a wonderful man he was also. So to Virgil Killstraight and to David Nichols and their families, we say thank you, and we're honored to have them in our lives, and what they worked hard for to study, to bring about this process of better understanding in dealing with historical truth. It took a lot of courage, a lot of time and energy and work on their behalf to get us where we are today. And so we're honored to have them be in our lives and to be a part through these documentaries, to be a part of that, to help us to bring this understanding of this history and our historical truth to this day. And so I would like to briefly speak on on the films of the Doctrine of Discovery of my process of getting involved with Stephen Newcomb. And I would read articles in Indian Country Today in the 90s, 2000s, about Stephen Newcomb's articles and about the Doctrine of Discovery. And so I became very interested in this process because I had begun the process of doing the Indian system and researching and then when I started reading the articles in Indian Country Today, I'm going, wait now, before I can go any further with the Indian system, I've got to start in this process. I've got to work and do a documentary about the Doctrine of Discovery and find this gentleman, Stephen Newcomb, who wrote his wonderful book. And Pagans in the Promised Land. So I was able to contact Stephen. He lived in California, so I was able to fly out from here to do research and connect with Stephen in Venice, California. We began to talk about his book and the Doctrine of Discovery, and got into the process of saying we get to start working on a documentary. This is very important for us to do. And Stephen was right on board automatically. And so that began our process in 2010 in Los Angeles to begin the process of doing a documentary. And in 2011, a year later, we began filming in that area. And so during our filming process, we were also able to travel to Puerto Rico to interview Dr. Luis Rivera, who also wrote a wonderful book called A Violent Evangelism back in 1992. So we were able to interview Dr. Luis Rivera, and he's in our documentary. He did an excellent program and speaking about the doctrine and his book. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Stephen. I understand our technical procedure is it takes about 20-30 seconds to transfer to Stephen, but I would like to read this last bit about our documentary before we turn it over to Stephen, which will be about a minute. So the film is based on the book Pagans in the Promised Land, Decoding the Doctrine of Christian Discovery by Stephen T. Newcomb. Today, in 2015, Chief Justice John Marshall's distinction between Christian people and heathens in Johnson versus McIntosh, 1823, is still treated by the U.S. Supreme Court as valid law for the United States. The Supreme Court has used the claimed right of Christian discovery and domination in the Johnson ruling as its underlying rationale for every ruling that it has handed down since 1823 regarding our original nations and peoples. Christopher Columbus and the other colonizers laid claim to the lands of original nations on the basis of the idea that Christians had a biblical right to discover and dominate non-Christian lands. This doctrine of ancient Christendom, supported by papal edicts, continues to serve as the conceptual foundation of the political and legal system of the United States, and as the conceptual foundation of other dominating political systems elsewhere in the world, in relation to original nations and peoples. So with that, I would like to now have Stephen Newcomb come on with us from his home in Los Angeles, and we're very grateful to Stephen for his contributions today. And it may take a few seconds to get into Stephen, but thank you very much again for being here. After Stephen is concluded, I'll come back on and speak a few words on the doctrine of discovery. I mean, on the Indian system, the second film documentary that we worked on. Thank you very much and for being here today with us, all of you. Oh, and I would just like to say again, very grateful for this day, for our Mother Earth and all her giving to us so we can survive at this time, and for our future generations, and especially for our children and our future generations. Oh, Midakiase, Panamia, thank you.
Well, greetings, everyone. I can't hear anything, so it's a little confusing for me, but I want to greet each and every one of you. Nula Delawensa Steve Newcomb, Nulalendum Elipauk, Gishilamiang, Kikayo Yamananinga ke, Mil Ongundawakan, Mili Ongundawakan, Wuli Nepali, Wuli Nepalinen, Wanishi, Gishilamiang, Kikayo Yamananinga ke. I want to begin by saying how honored I am to be able to meet with you all today, and in honor of Earth Day, Mother Earth, I guess we would say, and to say that I think it's wonderful that you're having this gathering today and including us in the mix. We have a very challenged history when we look back at what we've been facing for so many centuries. But before I go into any of that, I'd like to set the context for this conversation as I understand it. And that context begins with the original free and independent existence of our nations and peoples, extending back to the beginning of time through our oral histories and traditions, contrasted with the system of domination brought by ship across the ocean and imposed on everyone and everything. And when we have those two directions, then we also have a view from the shore looking out at those ships sailing toward our ancestors and the viewpoint of our ancestors. And we also have the view from the ship looking toward our ancestors with an intention of imposing a system of domination on everyone and everything. So I think that's the challenge that we face today, is how do we begin to understand more deeply what that really means. All those thousands and thousands of years of existence, to use Western European time frame language, resulted in the evolution of knowledge and wisdom systems of how to care for the earth and how to have a beneficial relationship with the earth and with the ecosystems, with the waterways, with all forms of life. And the words that I spoke, a short prayer in our language, addressing Gishelamiang, the one who created everything with thought. That those words that you're hearing, according to the archaeological data, they say that our peoples have been existing in our traditional territories for more than 13,000 years. So any of those words you're hearing, those sounds that you're hearing, are at least that old, which is kind of staggering when you think about it compared to 500 years or whatever since the people from on the ships came to this part of Turtle Island, or to any of Turtle Island and the Western Hemisphere, and went elsewhere in the world. In any case, what I wanted to also address is the effort that we, as the Indigenous Law Institute, my friend Virgil Killstraight and I founded that organization back in 1992. And we worked for more than 25 years on an effort to call upon the Vatican to formally revoke the Inter Cetera Papal Bull or Papal Decree of 1493 as symbolic of a series of Vatican documents that were issued back in that era. And we started that as a way to call attention to the fact that those Vatican papal documents are foundational to U.S. federal Indian law, Canadian Indian law, and other places in the world where those patterns of domination found in those documents are utilized against our nations and peoples. And when we began those efforts, we didn't really envision what might be ahead 30 years forward in time. But we've certainly come a long ways, and we miss Virgil greatly. He passed to the spirit world in February of 2019. But in honor of his memory and his legacy as an educator, as a ceremonial leader, as a tremendous human being, we carry on that effort to call upon the Vatican to formally revoke the papal bull in question, which is representative of the series of documents. So why would we bother with something that old? And what's the significance or importance of that? Well, what is revealed in those documents are patterns of domination, and what I even call a theology of domination. And for example, the Vatican papal document Romanus Pontifex takes language from a papal bull issued a few years prior to that time. It's called the Dum Diversas, and those are 1455 for Romanus Pontifex and 1452 for Dum Diversas. But they tell the King of Portugal as an example to go to the western coast of Africa and to invade, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, pagans, and other enemies of Christ, to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to take away all their possessions and property. And the papal documents from 1493, after Cristobal Colon, otherwise known as Columbus, sailed to the Bahamas and back to Western Europe, they contain similar language. There are 4 from that year, 1493. And of particular significance is a sentence that talks about lands discovered and to be discovered, que sub actuali dominio temporali aliquorum dominorum Christianorum constitute non assent. And what that means is lands that are not established under the domination of any Christian dominators. So that was the intention of those ships sailing to different parts of the world. It was an intention to establish a form of domination, what Pope Alexander VI in those 1493 papal documents refers to the Christian Empire, Christiani Imperii in Latin, and which is to be propagated, he says. But those patterns of domination have been afflicting our nations and peoples and the planet for obviously more than 5 centuries. So this is what we're trying to come to terms with by calling on the Vatican to formally revoke those documents. And to date, the Vatican hierarchy has never, that I know of, publicly quoted the actual language of those documents to reveal to the world and to be candid about the types of patterns of domination and so forth that are in those documents that were unleashed on the world at that time. So one of the questions that I'm asking is, how is it and why is it that the claim of a right of domination has been made into the organizing principle of the planet? And I think we need to figure out a way in which that can be discontinued, to say, no, we don't accept that. There's no such thing as a right of domination. And anyone that puts forward that viewpoint or that assumption, acts upon that basis, is acting upon something that has no validity whatsoever, on the basis of what could be called imperialistic law imposed by force and having no other validity than coercive imposition. So the Vatican, as you may have heard, under the leadership of Pope Francis, have issued a document, a statement, a press release on March 30th, in which they begin to incrementally address the issues that we have been bringing forward into their attention for decades, 3 decades now. And unfortunately, it only goes just a little just as a slight incremental step forward by acknowledging that there is such an issue, but they don't match the language that we've been talking to them about. They don't use the word domination in the document. There's a lot of deflection. There are historical misrepresentations in the document, and so that will have to be addressed. But at least they have placed the issue of the Vatican papal documents on the world stage very firmly, and that's a good thing. So I look forward to additional opportunities to encourage them to come clean, so to speak, with regard to the true nature of those documents and the kind of way in which they continue, those patterns that were put into place continue to afflict the world. And I think that, for example, the Laudato Si is a fascinating document, and it appears to be moving in the right direction. But again, it doesn't address these patterns of domination, specifically the language of those Vatican papal documents that were issued over and over again from 1434 regarding the Canary Islands and the Guanches people, all the way to 1514. And there is a statement that a papal document called Bull Sublimus Deus, or papal bull, called a bull because it's sealed with lead ball. But that document from 1537, according to William Washburn in his book Red Man's Land, White Man's Law, was revoked under pressure from Charles V, and the ecclesiastical penalties of interdict and excommunication were removed by Pope Paul III, who issued that document under pressure from Charles V. So it's all kind of nuanced in a lot of ways, but the important factor is that the way in which those patterns of domination were incorporated into U.S. federal Indian law and policy by way of a Supreme Court ruling called Johnson and Grams of Plessy versus McIntosh, and that particular decision in 1823. This is the 200-year mark of that decision by a unanimous court. And according to Joseph Story, who was a justice on the Supreme Court at that time, the principle of ultimate dominion, which is a euphemism and synonym for domination, a claim of right of domination, was actually influenced by the Vatican papal document of 1493. So it's very detailed, as I say, but there's only so much we can get into in a short space of time. But maybe I'll just go ahead and leave it there. And it's a little challenging to present in this manner because I'm basically just speaking to a phone. There's very little sense or no sense of human interaction. So that's the world we live in right now. But on the other hand, I'm very happy to be able to communicate with you, even if it is by means of this this digital world. So thank you very much, Wanishi, and I'll leave it right there for now.
Oh, Mendakiasi again. Or I should say, we started the documentary, The Indian System, after we completed the document of discovery, of course. But I would like to speak to a few things first. It's interesting how the French explorers came here to Minnesota from up through Canada down this way. They came to our area first, and some of them explorers were given articles and things to take back to France for the governance over in France. One of the things that were given to by our Dakota people here to France was a buffalo robe. In 2017, I went to Paris, France to do research on our Dakota history, because they have a lot of history there, of course, because of their explorers such as Hennepin, which I'll get into in a minute. So I went to Paris, France, and I stayed with my friend George Aguilar and his wife, Josie, and we went to a museum there in Paris. And because we heard there was a buffalo robe that was given to the French government by their early explorers, and it was called a winter count. In our way, it was a winter count. And so this was given by our Dakota, our Sioux Nation, in 16th, 17th century by French explorers. And the purpose that our Dakota Nation, our Sioux Nation, gave that winter count to the French government was that it was for the purpose of showing them that this is our governance. This is our governance. These are the stories of our people over each year of what happened to them and what was done that goes back a few hundred years prior to the 16th, 17th century. And so that established for our Sioux Nation our form of governance to the French and European nations that we're here. This is our territory. And so at the museum, we were able to look at this old buffalo robe. It was amazing to see this, amazing to see the buffalo robe that was given by our Sioux Nation to the French explorers long ago. And so another individual, another man, explorer that came to Minnesota is the priest, Father Hennepin. And what's interesting about Father Hennepin, while he was here in our area with our Dakota people, he became ill. He came down with pneumonia, and on his deathbed, basically, what has happened to him. So his helpers went to our Dakota spiritual leaders and said, "Our leader is ill, very ill. Can you help them? Can you help him, Father Hennepin?" So our Dakota spiritual leaders said, "Yes, you can come to our inipi." In English, that means sweat lodge. "You can come to our ceremony and we will help him and do ceremony for him, but he has to come to our inipi for 4 days in a row." And so Father Hennepin was taken to the sweat lodge and gone in through the ceremony with our spiritual leaders. And there they began the process of healing Father Hennepin through our original way of understanding that the Creator gave us through our ceremonial ways. And so when one thinks about that, and we think about the doctrine of discovery in that process that Stephen just mentioned, one forgets about our way of belief system. Our way of belief system from the beginning of time that the Creator gave us and our spiritual leaders, the process of running ceremonies and their purpose for helping and healing and understanding our balance that we walk in our life. And so one wonders about why what happened in the early days here with the American Indian movement, with Leonard Peltier. It's been in prison almost 50 years now, illegally. We wonder about our process with this system that can deny the rights of Leonard Peltier and others. When one thinks about the American Indian movement, when one thinks about the women also that were involved in the American Indian movement at that time in the 60s and 70s when with Wounded Knee and other things that were going on, they did not, maybe a few of them did, but most of them did not understand this system of the doctrine of discovery at that time. But they knew the injustices that were happening to our people were wrong. It was terrible what this federal government and the doctrine of discovery system, the Johnson versus McIntosh decision, was having the effect for all these years. So they stood up. They just stood up and they said no more. And so when we walked across this country in 1978 on the longest walk, we walked across because Congress has introduced bills to take away our treaties, to take away our identity of our land, take away all of our land, and make us citizens of the United States. So in January of 1978, we met in Sacramento and began the longest walk, and to educate people all the way across the country to Washington, D.C., that what the Congress, when they came back from their vacation in the summer, in September, they're going to come back and vote to take away all of our treaty rights, all of our rights, our land, everything. So we, of all nations, walked from Sacramento, California, all the way across the country, educating people along the way. To tell their representatives in each state to deny their vote, the vote when they come up in September. To deny that, please. Say no to this. And then when we got to Washington, D.C. in August, over 200, almost 300 people of our nations got together and walked up Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House. And we had talks for that whole week. We camped outside of Washington, D.C., and it gave talks and lectures about this, about what was going to come up this next month when Congress came back to vote on this topic. And when Congress came back to vote on this topic, on this terrible process in September, they all voted to deny all of this process, to deny these laws that would take away our land, our history, our treaties, everything. They all failed, but one did not. Only one passed. And what passed was the freedom of religion for American Indian people and American Indian nations. The only thing that passed. So now we could have our ceremonies and not get arrested from the government officials or the local town sheriffs or anybody like that. We could finally have a right to have our ceremonies. 1978. That's just amazing. And so we are here today to respect our Mother Earth and understand this system of healing. And back to Father Hennepin. So after 4 days of going through our Inipi ceremony with our elders, he was taken back and he became healed. They healed him from pneumonia, from almost dying. So Father Hennepin goes back to France, and he writes a book. And in his chapter about this experience with the Dakota spiritual leaders and healing him, he writes, when I went into the sweat lodge with them, their spiritual men would sing their songs, and they would cry, and their tears would be falling on my body. Their tears that were filthy. What is this spiritual man saying? Does he not understand that those tears are the essence of healing? When one cries of joy, when one cries of sorrow, when one is just brings about tears, those are sacred. Those are sacred moments in one's individual lifetime. That's healing. That's what sacredness is about, a part of it. The joy of a wonderful healing tear to fall on that priest to heal him. And this is what he writes in his book. There is an example of how we as First Nations people in our ceremonial way have been denied our understanding of what our way of belief system is about. It's wonderful healing, honesty, respect, dignity, a path in life that we get to walk. And so that was the French Father Hennepin's experience with our Dakota people. And with our buffalo robe that established our governance here with the French, through the French people and the European people that were here at that time by the 15th, around 16th century and 17th century. And so we have our sacred sites here around Minneapolis, St. Paul. My grandfather, Chief Black Dog, our village is called Magayutishni, which means in English, people who don't eat geese. And the reason they said that was their name is their village is right up the Minnesota River here, close to Fort Snelling, up about 2 or 3 miles up. And there's big areas of lakes there that the geese would fly in the springtime, and they would have their nest and have the flock of the young ones come in and be nourished right there. So the young ones would be born. So our people said, no, how can we live by our relatives, the geese, and then go kill them and eat them? It's not our way of belief. So we will respect our relatives, the wingeds, the geese, and we will say we are people that will not eat geese because we respect the life of what the geese represent, their little ones, to continue the natural laws and natural life of the winged so that we can survive. That's an example of our belief system and why our relatives were there. And so we have our sacred sites here. We have our burial mounds. We have Daku Wakan Tipi. We have a sacred cave over here in St. Paul. We have our Iansha, our red sacred rock, that goes back to our very beginning of our existence, our very foundation of our understanding of creation and how we came about. We have our sacred red rocks here in this area today. One is in the Methodist Church in St. Paul that was located on the Mississippi River, and it was removed by the Methodist Church back in 1800s to their facility. And they would use that red rock, take it on if it was very heavy, they would put it on a buggy and take it to their summer gatherings and show the people that this is the way the Indian people believe. This is their way of religion. They pray to a rock. But here's our Christian way. This is the gospel way. So they use that to misunderstand our way of belief system. That's an example of that. But it's kind of ironic because some of the explorers that came up the Mississippi River seen Eonshaw Red Rock on the bank of the river, and they wondered, what is that doing here? And our old spiritual leader said in a statement years before about Red Rock, he said that Red Rock was on the hill here, and you could see the trail how it moved down to the shore of where it's by the river. So that spiritual leader was saying that rock has life and movement in it. That connects with our understanding and respect for our sacred objects. And what about our Carver's Cave here, where all the symbols inside that sacred cave with our sacred water that comes out of that cave? Unteki, the water spirit, lives in our water, lives in our lakes here, travels that way. That's a part of our creation story. Bedote, where the Minnesota and Mississippi River meet, is the center of the earth and the center of the universe, the Star Nation. That's what our elders and old spiritual leaders have always said. That is our connection. Bedewakantoa people, our band, are known as Wichakpe Oyate, the star people. It is our responsibility to understand the connection of the universe, the Star Nation, and our Mother Earth, and how we came about. We come from the constellation Orion, they say. And we live on our Mother Earth, and when we go back from here, we go back to the Milky Way, the center of the universe, Minnesota and Mississippi River. That's our oral tradition and connection here as Bedewakantoa people. That's a story that's very rarely told. And so I would like to read briefly about Dr. David Nichols' book, what he wrote in his book about the Indian system. Dr. Nichols writes, let me explain about Dr. Nichols. Dr. David A. Nichols is a principal historian in this film. He holds a PhD in history from the College of William and Mary, and is a former professor and academic dean of Southwestern College in Winfield, Kansas. He has authored several books on Dwight Eisenhower, including his latest, Ike and McCarthy. His early book, Lincoln and the Indians, was hailed as undoubtedly the best book on Indian affairs in the years of Lincoln's presidency. My other historian in the documentary is Mark Dietrich, a native from Minnesota. He lives south of here, south of Minneapolis. Mark Dietrich is the author of 15 books on Native American topics, including his book Little Crow and the Dakota War, and is described as one of only about a half dozen people with substantial expertise about the history of Indian-white relations among the Sioux. And so one of our Christian bishops in Minnesota at the time, before the war, during and after, was Bishop Whipple. And Bishop Whipple tried to do a reform movement through Washington, in Washington, D.C., to reform the Indian system here. And when he wasn't able to do that, he wrote, when the war started, he writes, these reports could be duplicated all across the nation. Bishop Whipple's best summarized what the system did to the Indian. It gathers about him a whole load of harpies to prey on him and to rob him and goad him to madness. It makes promises to the ear and breaks them in life. It commences in discontent and ends in blood. And Dr. David Nichols writes in his book, it's the Indian system to serve white men. There were fundamental reasons why the Indian system failed to meet its stated goals of serving Native peoples. It was not really designed to protect Indians. It had its roots in the growth of a white population and a dynamic, aggressive culture bent on the acquisition of material wealth. The United States Senate recognized this truth. One day in 1862, the senators debated the need for a treaty in Oregon. They confronted an accomplished fact gold hunters were moving by the thousands into Indian land. Senator James Harlan of Iowa described these migrants accurately. They were the class of men who will not permit the Indians to remain in their way. Therefore, he concluded, the Indians will be driven off whether we agree to it or not. Another senator foresaw a war if they did not act. The whites were there illegally, but the Indians had to be removed, partly for their own protection. The senators demonstrated the institutionalized power of the Indian system by what was felt unsaid in that debate. It hardly occurred to them that the army could be used to enforce the law. It would be unthinkable to use force against whites on behalf of Indians. Removal was the only course open. Removal, of course, meant beginning again the cycle that nourished the Indian system, providing money and jobs for ambitious men of the Lincoln era. So the documentary was done because of also for my own family and my relatives. The 38 plus 2, I named my production company 38 plus 2 in honor of the 38 that were hung in Mankato in 1862 and the two later Dakota chiefs that were hung in 1865 at Fort Snelling. And so my relatives that were hung to the 38 in Mankato, and my relatives, my grandfather was hung here at Fort Snelling, the two later Medicine Bottle and Chief Little Six. They were hung in 1865 here. So that's why I'm named as my production company this. And I researched what happened to Medicine Bottle and Little Six bodies after they were hanged at Fort Snelling. Actually, what I did in the film is I portrayed my grandfather, Medicine Bottle, in this film, told our Dakota side of the story. And so as a storyteller in my life, that was my responsibility, and I was honored to represent my grandfather to tell this Dakota side of the story as he was hanged at Fort Snelling. And so we filmed right in the very cell at Fort Snelling where he he stayed for 2 years before the hanging. And so after the hanging, it was interesting. They took the bodies back to the dead house at the fort, and thousands of people that came there to watch the hanging were watching to see where they're going to take the bodies. So they put rocks in wooden coffins and put them on a horse and the buggy outside to make it look heavy, so that thinking the people would see the bodies were in there, and they took them to a funeral, to the grave site there. So then the people left. That evening, the fort commander allowed 2 doctors in St. Paul to come up the river in a boat to come and take the bodies of Medicine Bottle and Little Six and take them back in their boat to their offices in St. Paul to preserve their bodies. So they put them in wooden barrels half filled with whiskey to preserve their bodies. And they shipped the bodies to Philadelphia, to Thomas Jefferson College of Medicine, where Dr. Pankos, one of the founders of that college, did 10 days after the bodies were there, Pankos held a meeting with all the elite of Philadelphia, an important subject that we'd like to talk about. So all the elite moneymakers of Philadelphia came to listen to Dr. Pankos speak. And during that process, he told about 2 Dakota warrior chiefs that were hung in Minnesota. And by the way, I have one of the bodies here with me. Would you like to see it? They brought Little Six. Little Six, Chief Little Six, out. I opened up the thing, and there was Chief Little Six's body. So when I did my research, I went to Thomas Medicine School of College of Medicine in Philadelphia and did my research, and I was able to spend 4 hours up in their research library with the director there. And he told me, I said, here's the article that I researched on Dr. Pankos having his meeting with the people and brought out Little Six's body. Where's this article here? Where are the bodies that were brought here? And he says, at that time, we didn't keep the records. We didn't keep records of bodies. So that's what happened to Medicine Bottle and Little Six's bodies. So you've been on a request to have any bodies out there that people have taken. They've taken the bodies and remains of people of the 38 that were hung. The doctors from the hospital here took bodies of the 38. And so it's a harsh reality. It's hard to understand that this could possibly happen. But it did. It continued to do it because of the doctrine of Christian discovery. And on my last thing I just say, I don't know what my time element is here. I got 5 minutes. I would like to say Wopita Tonka to all our relatives of the women out there to have the strength of understanding, to have the strength of giving us our grandchildren, our children, on this day of a Mother Earth Day. I have my youngest granddaughter, Aria, is now 1 year old. And my grandson, Irie, her brother, is 8, going to be 8. So we stand here for our children, our grandchildren, to respect, for them to understand someday why we do this, why historical truth is so important for our understanding as human beings. Why it's important for our educational system, our leaders that are in Minnesota and in Washington, of all the senators and congressmen. Why it is so important for truth to be told in our history books. Because if our children are denied our truth, whole history is going to come back and do it again and again and again, what happened to First Nations and peoples. But if they understand historical truth and taught it in our educational system, they're going to say, no, now I understand historical truth in this country, where it originated and what happened, and we're not going to allow that to happen again. Do we want our children to understand and be strong and do the right thing in that beautiful path? Yes, we get to. We get to have them do that. That is the only way we can survive in this world. And I would like to conclude with this, talking about our path. Our Dakota our spiritual leaders in that, they always said, come from the heart before the mind. So the scientists say, why are our elders, or why are the Native people elders and spiritual leaders say this, come from the heart before the mind? We better do a test. We better study this. So what they did was they did a test. They studied this and they found out that before we speak, the heart sends a message to the mind 3 seconds before what comes out of your mouth. That was the scientific study results. 3 seconds, when your heart tells you to speak through your mind, 3 seconds elapses from your heart to your mind to what comes out of you. So our spiritual leaders, our elders, were saying, walk a good path and always remember to come from the heart first. That was their oral understanding and spiritual value system, that when we walk and nourish ourselves with love, dignity, respect, goodness, gratefulness for what we have, then that is our heart. This is where that's going to come out of our individual self first. So then when you walk that good red road, that good path from your heart, that will come out from your mind to your mouth through the verbal process of understanding. Respecting yourself and healing yourself in that manner by coming from the heart first before the mind. And with that, I say thank you to our elders. And I thank you, all of you here today and out there. And thank you, Stephen Newcomb, Virgil Kilstrade, Dr. David Nichols, and all those who are involved in this process of these documentaries. And I'm honored to be here today and honor our Mother Earth in a good way, of those sacred way of our Mother Earth that the Creator put here for all of us. Oh, Midakiasi, all my relations. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Liz Mock, and I'm a member of the Justice Council. We want to thank you so much, Steve and Sheldon, for sharing with us and educating us today. Paulo Freire said, "Some may think that to affirm dialogue, the encounter of women and men in the world, in order to transform the world, is naively and subjectively idealistic. There is nothing, however, more real or concrete than people in the world and with the world, than humans with other humans." Your presence here, being in dialogue with us, as we continue to go deeper in learning about history and its impact on current reality is invaluable to us. We will continue to discern our individual and collective response to this learning. Healing tears, that will stay with me in my heart, and I know in the hearts of many of us today. We will now take an extended break for you to stretch your legs, visit the restrooms, and then take some time along the east and north corridors of the building, where you can visit the river of history of our Native American siblings and our interconnectedness in this history. The display is a glimpse of the history, the beauty, and the traumas experienced by those who lived on this land long before us. Archaeologists have recorded settlements of Native Americans in Minnesota dating back at least 10,000 years ago. We will begin our journey leaving the sanctuary on the east side. So Mary and Peg will be back here and get you in the right direction to the start of the display and to the restrooms if needed. You will first come to the Chief Joseph room, and Pax Christi has named all of their rooms in the building for social justice leaders. As we reflect on the holy ground we walk here, we remember those who have led the way to teach, to inform, and to help us formulate our response to social issues in our world today. You will have about 20 minutes for this walk through the river of history, and then you will hear a bell ringing. And that is to call us back together here for the next part of our program. If you are joining us by live stream, we will be back in the sanctuary at 11 o'clock. So please come back to your computer screen. And I welcome you to begin your time of a break. Thank you.
That's okay, because I have some other stuff too.
Yeah.
Just tell me when I should start.
Yes.
Start?
I think so.
No, this is good. This is good enough. Well, because we're kind of on a schedule here today, I'm going to begin, and I'm excited to walk with you on a virtual tour around our sacred grounds here at Pax Christi. But before I begin, I want to share with you how important the term integral environment is. Pope Francis shares this with us in his encyclical Laudato Si of caring for our home. So what does it mean? It simply means that everything in the world is connected, just as Sheldon shared with us in his stories. What happens here affects what's happening down here. And with caring for our earth, this is a very important thing that we have to be reminded about. So one reason I felt our Care for Creation team had to get involved with the Land Acknowledgement Project was because I feel there is no one more in tune with our Creator than our Indigenous brothers and sisters. Their belief is what this is all about. They believe that everything is connected. When they're about to harvest a branch or a tree or a plant, they take a moment and they thank the Creator before they take away that branch. Many times they take tobacco, their sacred plant, they sprinkle a little bit down, and they say thanks to the Creator for this gift that they've been given. What an important lesson for all of us to learn. They truly understand what an integral ecology is all about. So I've been interested in plants for quite a while. I had a great professor in college that I had taken a biology class from, and that interest led to taking workshops. And then my husband and I loved good old Ewell Gibbons, which maybe many of you have read. We did a little mushroom hunting, and we did, all those kind of fun things. And then I also found from my son-in-law this great app on my phone called Seek. You might want to look that up. It's S-E-E-K, and it helps you tell which plants are which. And I've also read a lot of good books like Braiding Sweetgrass and Gathering Moss and The Seed Keeper and As Long as Grass Grows. These are all wonderful books to help you learn a little bit about our life around us. I'm no expert, but I do love looking and learning. So I think we can probably start with our first slide. Pax Christi is lucky to have 25 acres, right, Matt? 25? 23, 25 acres of land in this space. And we have a beautiful woods out to our west side. And around that path, I took a walk one day and just kind of thought about the plants that might have been here during our Indigenous brothers and sisters' time that they were here. And as we start down this path, there's a hillside on the left. And 2 years ago, our Care for Creation team and a company called Natural Shore came and we pulled out all the invasives that were up on the hillside, and we put in, I would say, close to 3,000 native plants. Now, a native plant, the definition of it is, it's a species that grew naturally in the ecosystem without human introduction. So that means it was here first. It was here when our indigenous brothers and sisters were here. So as we're walking along the path, our Eagle Scouts put in a beautiful bridge, and along this bridge, you find all these really tall plants, about this tall, I guess they get, and if you're lucky, they're full of butterflies, and it's called the Joe Pye weed. It's a very, very important plant. It's a host for so many butterflies and insects and birds, and I thought that was kind of a strange name, and so I looked up how that came to be, and the story goes that Joe Pye was a medicine man, and he used a concoction from this wild plant that he found growing in the area, and he used it to cure typhoid fever. His brew is said to have halted an epidemic that raged through Massachusetts. Hence, that local plant became known as the Joe Pye weed. So, as you're traveling or walking that path, when you see Joe Pye weed, think about that. Okay, let's go to our first group here. So plants that they use for ceremonies are the cedar, the red willow, the silky dogwood, the sumac leaves, and corn silk. So cedar, it's a ceremonial plant. It was used as incense and a purifying herb. It's associated with prayer, healing, dreams, and protection against disease. Go ahead. The red willow, that was used for food, the berries were. It was used to treat colds, and it can also slow bleeding. And it was known as kansasa, I believe. It's the inner, and they would take the red dogwood, and again, before they would take one of the branches, they would put some tobacco down, say a prayer, thank God for that gift, and then they would clip it, and they would take off the red bark, and the red bark could be used for dyeing, probably, I don't know, probably hides or different things. And then what was inside of that, they would shave it down and dry it, and then that was mixed with other things, and that was used as their tobacco. And a thing to remember is when the dogwoods would flower, that was a sign that it was time to plant their corn. The berries on the dog corn are red. And then the silky dogwood, pretty much they use the same way. The silky dogwood has blueberries with white blotches, and their branches are kind of more of a salmon color. Okay, let's go to the next one. That's our sumac. Everybody knows sumac. That was used as a medicinal plant, and it could be used as a gargle for sore throats as well as a remedy for diarrhea. The leaves and the berries were used as tea to reduce fevers. And the fuzzy part of the plant could be harvested into a drink that was similar to our lemonade. And if you're staying for lunch today, you'll get a taste of that lemonade. Now for smudging ceremonies. Sage. Sage was one of their plants. This is a white sage that is highly aromatic. It is used in smudging ceremonies. It is used to clear the negative energy from a space. This plant picture that I took, I found along the roadsides. It grows very well in ditches. I didn't see any here in Eden Prairie at our site. And then some other noteworthy plants that I found as we walked around our path is the cattail. known as a supermarket of the swamp. All parts of this plant can be used, and it's also used for medicine. You can dig up the roots, you can boil them, and they're kind of like a potato. And the roots can also be ground into flour. And the sticky sap that the leaves acted like a starch that you could use if you were making a stew or a soup. And the stalks were used in making mats for the wigwams. And the string could be made from the fibers at the base of the leaves. And the fluffy part that comes out of that cattail on the top was also used as an insulation for footwear and also babies' cradle boards. Nothing was wasted. Everything was used. Everything was a gift from the Creator. Next one. Oh, that's just the explanations. And then I did find a plum and a grape tree out there. I don't think I'd be able to tell what they are now because I needed the flowers to show me where it was. And then we also, I noticed, have a lot of blackberry vines around. So all of those things were used to eat dry or fresh. All right. And then the last ones that I came across were the bur oak and our maples. And the bur oak, the acorns were an excellent food source, and they were roasted or boiled or otherwise treated before you would eat them. They could be ground into a flour and used as food and for medicinal purposes. The wood was used for tool handles, corn pounding mortars, baskets, and barrels. And then we come to the maple. The maple tree was very, very sacred. And again, before they would take the syrup from that tree, all those trees were blessed before it was taken from them. Harvesting the sap and cooking it into syrup is a long process. This was used in making maple syrup and maple sugar, and it was used in food preparation as well as harvesting the wood and stripping it into pieces to weave baskets for their berry picking and other uses. Because of this project, I was introduced to a wonderful place that I'm going to tell each of you might want to go see. It's called Porky's Sugar Bush Environmental Center in Independence, Minnesota. Look it up on Facebook. It's a great story. It's owned by an indigenous person named Porky. And you will get to be a participant in everything that takes place with collecting syrup. And not only do you get to do that, but you get to sit and you get to visit with the indigenous people and learn so many wonderful things. So I believe that's all I have up there. Is that right, Claudine? Other than this. I do not think the measure of a civilization is how tall its buildings of concrete are, but rather how well its people have learned to relate to their environment and fellow man. Sun Bear Ojibwe. And I think that pretty much takes care of this. And now we will have our land acknowledgement read.
Thank you, Peg. I can't wait to take a walk once it gets above 50. Okay. My name is Phyllis Olson, and I'm currently the chair of the Community Council here at Pax Christi, and I'm one of the members of the Land Acknowledgement Team. So I'd like to invite all of the Land Acknowledgement Team up.
We're here, we're behind.
Oh, you are?
Right behind
Okay. And we are going to proclaim for the first time in our space the Pax Christi Land Acknowledgement. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. "Teacher, which commandment is in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets."
We, the members of the Pax Christi Catholic community of Eden Prairie, give thanks to the Mdewakanton Sioux, a community of the Dakota Nation, who traditionally have lived on this fertile land along the banks of the Minnesota Wakpa, or Minnesota River, for hundreds of years. Ancestral remains of the Dakota people and artifacts have been uncovered here in Eden Prairie. The Dakota are strong, spiritual people with deep connection to the land. We honor the Dakota people for their way of life, caring for relationships with people and the earth.
The past. A series of papal bulls issued by the Catholic Church starting in 1452 formed the basis of a spiritual, political, and legal concept known as the doctrine of discovery. This justified colonization, religious conversion, and seizure of land not inhabited by Christians. Thus, the indigenous people of the Americas suffered persecution and death at the hands of many nations. Applying the doctrine of discovery, the United States government ceased treaty making and broke many treaties, removed indigenous peoples from their homelands, relocated them to reservations, and sent indigenous children to boarding schools far from their parents. These actions were intended to erase indigenous culture, language, and a way of life. These abusive and destructive actions created the generational trauma that still exists today.
The present. It is time to recognize the injustice that exists. We must take action. We commit to building relationships with Indigenous people to better understand how our Pax Christi community can be most supportive of Indigenous rights. From our Indigenous friends, we learn that not only humans are important, but that all creation is sacred and it needs to be respected. We commit to joining our Indigenous neighbors as advocates for racial reconciliation, for healing, and for ecological justice.
Our prayer for the future. As we gather in this sacred space, the ancestral land of our Mdewakanton Sioux family, we embrace our gospel's call for reconciliation and for what reconciliation means here and now. As stewards of this sacred space, we are grateful for the wisdom of the Indigenous people, for their deep respect for the earth, for their belief in giving without looking for anything in return, for their belief in the sacredness of relationships. May our care for the Pax Christi community of Eden Prairie grow in this same wisdom. We acknowledge the deep historical, spiritual, and personal injustices against Indigenous peoples that continue today as segregation and prejudice. We pledge to listen to the Indigenous people, to guide us to responsible action for reconciliation and mutual respect. May we all continue to educate ourselves. May we promote healing, respect, and love. Let us journey together in partnership, celebrating our Creator's gifts of people, land, and water, nurturing each other and this sacred space.
Speak the things you see. Let new names take and root and thrive and grow. And even as you travel far from heather, crag, and brook, may you, like the little fisherman, set the stream alight with glitter. May you enter now as autumn, without falter into water. Look to the sky with care, my love, and speak the things you see. Let new names take and root and thrive and grow. And even as you journey on, past dying stars exploding, like the gilded one in flight, leave your little gifts of light. And in the dead of night, my darling, find the gleaming eye of starling, like the little aviator. Sing your heart to all dark matter. Walk through the Walk through the world with care, my love, and sing the things you see. Let new names take and root and thrive and grow. And even as you stumble through my hair sands eroding, let the fern unfurl your grieving. Let the heron still your breathing. Let the selkie swim you deeper. Oh, my little silver seeker. Even as the hour grows bleaker, be the singer and the speaker. And in city and in forest, let the larks become your chorus. And when every hope
What an incredible morning this has been. And you know what? We're not done yet. My name's Miriam Porter, and I'm on the Justice Council, and I get to invite you to lunch. Now, the Mazapia is a restaurant in Prairie Lake, and they put together a Whole Foods, delicious, organic lunch for us. Now, the word is, even if you haven't registered for lunch, please come. There's plenty of food. So let's all plan on having lunch together, and then when we have lunch together, let's talk about what we've experienced today. And also, there's people here with name badges on that are from the different councils that help put this together, the Land Acknowledgement, the Care for Creation, and the Justice Council. And you may like to ask them about what their work is, what our work is, what we do, and how you could be part of it, possibly. Also, Mr. Wolfchild will be present at dinner, and he'll be available to talk to you and us about his experiences. So what a resource to have in our midst. So let's plan on having lunch together, and to get there, we go the direction that we went to go to the River of History walk. And with that, just kind of follow your way. Go downstairs, though, to Nazareth Hall, and you'll find it's a gym, which is set up for lunch, and that's where we'll eat. So continue to enjoy the day, and I look forward to seeing you over lunch. Goodbye now.